Okay, so we have some questions here, and I want to go ahead and respond to them. Thanks for sharing your experience. You're welcome. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the questions. We'll take them one at a time. Can I ask you how old you were when you realized your mom was the one that was sick? I think I was in my 20s when I realized that she was the one with the problem. And I say I think because I had a sense that some things weren't right. I just didn't attach them to her in particular. Like, I thought I was the one that was damaged goods because that's what she used to tell me. So I recognized that she didn't seem to look like the TV moms, for example. At the same time, I didn't define her as being sick. I defined her as hating me, right? When I was 12 and I went to boarding school, I realized that my normal wasn't actually how everybody lived. Boarding school gave me an opportunity at the age of 12 to live in an environment where nobody was actually trying to hurt me, nobody was criticizing me. Every day was pretty much the same. It was very predictable and stable. So that was my first period in my life that was eye-opening in that way. Because even when I went to summer camp, because it's a bunch of kids together and there's like camp counselors and we're kind of not left to our own devices, there's supervision, it isn't the same type of experience. So around the age of 12 is when I started to recognize that, right? And then when I met my ex-husband, when we were dating, I think I was 20, 21, 22, in that range. He would point things out to me and actually pointed something out to my mother because my mother was smear campaigning me to him going, oh, that Marnie, she had a baby when she was 17, like it takes 100 people to get you pregnant kind of thing. Or did you know she was always running away and she ran away at 13 and didn't even think of us and turned her back on us, like that kind of thing. Like literally saying these things to my then boyfriend who would later become my husband and then my ex-husband. We're all good. Everybody's good. He was a good husband and he is a good ex-husband. And my ex-husband said to her, well, you know, for a little girl to be running away like that and prefer living on the streets than her own home, something must have been really wrong. Like he got it. He nailed it. Didn't hurt that he has a degree in psychology. He was never a practicing psychologist, but he did use that in his job. All that to be said, he was also behind the scenes helping me to navigate her in what we now call gray rocking. He used to call it mental judo, agree and proceed. And he taught me how to interact with her in a way that I could feel empowered and safer and not buy into what she was doing to me and spin me out, because she could spin me out like this, right? She put the wounds there and she knew where the buttons were because she was the person who planted the buttons. It was also around this time that my ex-husband would say, you know, you were just a little girl. And he would point to my little girl and go, that was you. And so at that point, I'm kind of like, oh, well, but I wasn't lovable. And he's like, no, you were just like her. Because that's the thing, right? I could look at my child and my children, eventually I had more, as lovable beings. And because I didn't know that I was lovable as a child, I had the impression of myself, of little Marnie, as being deserving of what my mother did. And then I got into therapy in my mid-20s, I would say around 26 years old. I lucked into a therapist who really knew a lot about narcissistic family systems, narcissistic parents, sociopathies, antisocial personality disorder kind of thing. And when my experiences began to unfold as I went through therapy, she pointed out a lot of things to me and said that she felt very strongly that my mother had personality disorders. It didn't mean a whole lot to me to know that at the time. It meant more to me that I knew now it wasn't my fault. You know what I mean? Like, my mother's diagnosis never really meant anything to me other than the validation of she is a truly empty person, devoid of any ability or even desire to love, to show up with kindness, to do anything for anybody else altruistically. Like, she's completely empty. She's got, in my mind, and I'm sure a lot of people can see it, a black soul. She's just, you know, empty. Would you cry when she said this? Would you say, please don't? I think this was on the video, and if not, correct me, but I'm pretty sure where my mother, at the age of 9, she would start calling me a tramp. She knew that I was being emmed, and she was calling me damaged goods. She told me she knew what I was doing, and then she was sending me back to the person who was emming me. She also told me that everybody knew that I was sick in the head and that I belonged in a psych ward and I needed a shrink. People couldn't understand how she kept me around, all of the things. And the answer is no, I was a very good little statue. Showing my mother any emotion would only enrage her more. And I spent a lot of time, like if she asked me, why did you do that? How could you do that? Like when she would berate me about some phantom thing that I had done. Like for example, she would go in my closet, rip it apart. But before she did that, she would like wrinkle a shirt over and go, what's this? Because everything had to be folded flat, crease free, size, color, the whole 9 yards. And I mean, I'm 10 years old, right? I mean, there were times I remember getting ready for school and I would just take whatever was at the top. It didn't matter because I was terrified of creating a situation, again, my fault, right? Where she would go into that rage. And of course she would rage at me and call me all the things and tell me how worthless and I was a slob and why are you such a slob? So the questions would come in and I would just shrug my shoulders, look at the floor, and I could feel the tears burning my eyes, but I would not let them fall. And then she, of course, would go, look at me when I talk to you, and I'd look up and I'd go in statue mode. Frozen, expressionless, trying to just keep myself really, really still and small. And she'd say, wipe that look off your face. And then I would look down again. And that would be part of the abuse, right? That would be part of her game. So yeah, long answer to your question. I dared not question her, ask her to stop, nothing of the kind. I had already been experiencing so much abuse from her, and also I say M instead of the other correct initials because videos get suppressed when you talk about certain things, but my grandparents were the perpetrators of that against me. Starting around the age of 3 is my earliest memory, so I already knew that my body didn't belong to me. I already knew that I didn't have the right to say no. I already knew that my purpose in life was to serve others, in a nutshell. Do you remember taking her seriously? And I think you mean to say, were you terrified? I took every threat, every word, every nuance, her body language completely seriously. I had every idea that my mother was capable of anything and everything. And I lived in fear of her every moment of my childhood. And that's why I talk about the fact that I never loved my mother. My desire for my mother was to have safety from her, to not need protection from her, and for her to love me. I didn't realize for a long time that I wasn't stuck in a cycle with her because I loved her. I was stuck in a cycle with her because I wanted to be good enough for her and have her love me. And all that to be said, I actually don't have any memories where I wasn't in fear of my mother. Thanks for the question. Anybody else has any comments, questions, or you want to share your experience, please drop it in the comment section because as always, we're all healing and growing together. I really appreciate these questions in particular because it helps us to talk about what's going on behind the scenes, what's happening emotionally. Remember that when you're born to a parent who is an abuser, particularly a narcissistic abuser, I think all abusers are narcissistic to a degree, but narcissistic abuse has some different markers. It's more emotional than any other type of abuse. It's more insidious, it's layered, it's constant and consistent, that sort of thing. You right out of the gate when you're born into a parent like that, born to a parent or adopted to a parent like that, the messaging, the training that they give to you makes it pretty much impossible to push back. I mean, some kids naturally go into fight, but most of us don't. Most of us go into fawn, freeze, and flight because those are the safest places for us to be. And we're very much turned into chameleons so that we can survive our environment. We don't know that we have a right to set boundaries. And in fact, we know that we have no right to set boundaries in that situation.